I was barely keeping it together, my legs trembling as I limped down the cracked sidewalk, my baby clinging to my hip, tiny fingers wrapped around my shirt as if holding on to me could somehow shield him from the chaos swirling around us. Every step felt like wading through molasses, my heart pounding not just from the physical exhaustion but from the weight of everything I had lost. My car was gone, taken really, by the person I had trusted the most, someone who promised love but delivered betrayal. He had told me I was lucky to be allowed to stay in the apartment he let me occupy, his words dripping with false generosity. Lucky, I wanted to scream, wanted to kick down the walls he had built around my life, but all I could do was hobble forward, tiny boots scraping against the rough asphalt, my baby's soft coo's a fragile soundtrack to my breaking heart. And then I heard his voice. Calm, measured, but with an unmistakable edge that cut through my panic. Why are you walking? Where's your car? I froze, my chest tightening. I knew that voice anywhere, my father. He was standing there, eyes sharp, seeing through the trembling, exhausted figure I tried to pass off as fine. The sight of him made my throat constrict with a mixture of relief and shame. Relief that someone finally saw what had been happening. Shame because I had allowed it to go on so long without saying anything. I wanted to sink to the ground, to curl up and disappear, but I couldn't. Not with him watching, not with my baby depending on me. His mom took it. I whispered, my voice barely audible. Said I'm lucky they let me stay. The words sounded pathetic even to my own ears. I expected disappointment, maybe even judgment, but instead, he just looked at me. A long, assessing look that seemed to weigh every ounce of my suffering, every bruise, every sleepless night. Then finally he said, "Get in the car. We're fixing this tonight." That simple declaration lit a spark I didn't realize I still had inside me. My father didn't ask, didn't question, didn't lecture. He acted. His certainty made my own fears feel small, absurd even. For the first time in months, I felt the faintest flicker of hope, the kind that had been buried under piles of manipulation and lies. I lifted my baby a little higher, taking his tiny weight as a reminder of why I couldn't let this continue. As we drove, I clung to the warmth of my father's presence, silent tears sliding down my cheeks. He didn't try to fill the silence with words, he just drove, hands steady on the wheel, eyes fixed on the road ahead. And in that quiet, I realized something. For all the cruelty I had endured, for all the ways I had been cornered and humiliated, I wasn't alone anymore. He was here, and together, we were going to confront the injustice I had been subjected to. I thought about my baby, about the little life that was completely dependent on me, and a surge of fierce determination coursed through me. No more pretending. No more compromise. The person who had tried to control my life, to strip me of my dignity, was about to meet a reckoning, and as my father glanced at me, a small, almost imperceptible nod acknowledging the unspoken plan forming between us, I knew that tonight would be the night everything changed. The streets blurred past us, but my mind was sharp, alive with the clarity of someone who had nothing left to lose. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel broken. I felt ready. The hum of the car engine was the only sound for a long stretch, and I clung to that quiet like a lifeline. My baby had finally dozed against my chest, tiny breaths soft and uneven, and I felt a pang of guilt for letting him witness my weakness. But my father didn't seem to notice my trembling hands or the tear-streaked face hidden in the folds of my jacket. He drove with that same steady determination, eyes forward, jaw tight, as if the very act of moving toward confrontation would strip away the fear I had carried for months. "Tell me everything," he said finally, voice low but unyielding. There was no accusation, no judgment, only an edge that demanded honesty. I swallowed hard, the words catching in my throat, and began recounting the months of slow erosion, how little things had piled up, how controlling behaviors disguised as concern had become rules, and how manipulation had kept me tied to a life that felt like a cage. I spoke of the late-night arguments, the cold silences, the moments my baby had cried in my arms while I silently wondered if I was failing him by staying. My father listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer empty reassurances. He just listened, and somehow that made me stronger. For the first time, I realized that I had been carrying not just the weight of betrayal, but the burden of isolation. That isolation was gone now. When I finished, he let out a slow breath and said, "We're not just fixing this tonight. We're making sure it never happens again. But you have to help me. I can't do it for you." I nodded, and the surge of clarity hit me like a jolt. He wasn't offering a miracle. He was offering a partnership, a plan, and that meant I had to rise to the occasion. Together, we began to strategize. My father's approach wasn't rash or vengeful, it was methodical. First, we listed every instance of betrayal and manipulation, every lie, every slight. Then we talked about the practical steps: securing evidence, documenting messages, arranging witnesses, making sure that every move the other party had made was visible and undeniable. It was strange, almost intoxicating, to feel my fear turn into focus. My father guided me through each decision, reminding me of my rights, my strength, and my worth. He told me stories from my own childhood, of times I had overcome small injustices, of the resilience I had always carried inside, even when I doubted it. Those memories, once comforting, became fuel for action. I realized I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for my baby, for the life he deserved to grow up in, free from fear and chaos. And yet, even as the plan formed, doubt crept in. The person who had taken my car, who had treated me like I was disposable, had always thrived on control. Could we really outmaneuver someone like that? My father noticed my hesitation and didn't scold me. Instead, he placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "You're not doing this alone. Remember that. Whatever happens, we face it together." The weight of those words settled in me like armor. I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. We weren't just preparing for confrontation, we were reclaiming our agency, one careful, deliberate step at a time. By the time we arrived home, the plan was solid, every angle covered, every contingency considered. I looked down at my sleeping baby and felt a warmth I hadn't known in months, a fierce, protective certainty that nothing, not even betrayal, could take away what mattered most. Tonight, we weren't just confronting injustice. Tonight, we were rewriting the rules, taking back control, and teaching the people who underestimated us exactly what it meant to betray the wrong person. And as we stepped out of the car, my father's steady hand guiding us both, I felt it, the first real surge of hope, strong enough to push away fear and pain. Whatever happened next, I was ready. We arrived at the house just as the sky was bruising into twilight, the kind of deep purple that makes the world feel smaller and more urgent. My father parked a few blocks away, and we approached on foot, silent but for the soft patter of my baby's little feet inside the carrier against my chest. Every step made my heart hammer, not with fear alone, but with a strange mixture of anticipation and righteous anger. The betrayal that had haunted me for months, the way my life had been manipulated and controlled, was about to meet the reckoning it deserved. I hesitated at the doorstep, hand hovering over the handle, and my father leaned closer, his voice low and steady. "Remember what we talked about. Stay calm. Speak truth. Nothing he says can touch you if you stick to that." His eyes met mine, unwavering, and I nodded, feeling the armor of his confidence slide over me. It was strange, comforting, terrifying, empowering, all at once. The door swung open before we even knocked. He stood there, smug, his eyes flicking over me, then landing on my baby, his expression twisting between annoyance and surprise. "What are you doing here?" he asked, voice sharp but faltering, as if he could sense something different about the woman standing before him. "I came for what's mine," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. "For what you took, for the lies, for the control, and I'm not leaving without it." He laughed, a hollow, dismissive sound, like he had heard this speech 100 times before, but he didn't notice the way my father's presence made the air between us heavy, charged. My dad stepped forward, hands relaxed but ready, his gaze locked on the man who had caused so much damage. "You underestimated her," he said simply, almost quietly, and that was enough to unbalance him. I took a deep breath, then began. I spoke slowly, carefully recounting every slight, every act of manipulation, every moment where I had been made to feel worthless. My words were precise, almost surgical. I didn't yell. I didn't plead. I told the truth. I laid out the evidence we had gathered, the messages, the threats, the times he had attempted to isolate me, and watched as his smug facade began to crack. He tried to interrupt, tried to deflect, but my father's voice cut through, calm and deliberate. "Do you hear yourself? This is the consequence of your actions. You can't manipulate what is plain to see." Each word landed like a hammer. The man who had thought himself untouchable was floundering, fumbling for control, and for the first time, I felt power, not anger, not vengeance, but true steady power. My baby stirred in my arms and I held him closer, letting that tiny life remind me of why I had endured so much and why I could never allow fear to dictate our world. I watched as the arrogance in his eyes crumbled, replaced by disbelief and a touch of fear. He realized too late that his games had backfired, that his deceit and cruelty were no match for truth delivered with precision and backed by unwavering support. By the time the confrontation ended, the house felt different, like the air had been cleared of years of lies. He stood there, defeated not by force, but by the undeniable reality of his actions. My father placed a firm hand on my shoulder, grounding me, and I realized that we had done more than reclaim what was taken. We had declared that betrayal would not go unchallenged, that manipulation had limits, and that love for family, for life, for truth, was stronger than any cruelty. As we walked away, my baby's eyes wide and curious, I felt a profound sense of relief. It wasn't just justice, it was liberation, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I believed that life could be ours again, whole and unbroken. The night air was crisp as we left the house behind, each step lighter than the last. I could feel the tension of months, the weight of sleepless nights and constant anxiety, beginning to dissolve. My baby yawned against my chest, tiny fists curling in contentment, completely unaware of the storm that had just passed. And yet, in his quiet presence, I felt the truest victory of all, not the humiliation of the person who had wronged me, but the reclaiming of my life, my dignity, my future. The next morning, the consequences of the confrontation began to ripple. Messages I had sent, carefully worded and backed with evidence, reached the people who mattered: family members, mutual acquaintances, even the workplace he had taken for granted. The lies and manipulations he had spun so confidently unraveled, exposing the truth in a way that left him isolated. There was no need for anger or theatrics. The quiet effectiveness of truth had done more damage than any shouting ever could. It was the sweetest kind of revenge, methodical, undeniable, and clean. I watched it unfold from a distance, my father by my side, as the world began to see the person I had known him to be all along. He had underestimated me, underestimated the bond I shared with the man who had always been my protector. And now, without a single word of malice from me, without any need to stoop to his level, he faced the consequences of his arrogance. There was a strange satisfaction in that, knowing that justice had come not from fury, but from resilience, intelligence, and unwavering support. At home, the atmosphere felt lighter than it had in years. For the first time, I could move freely, make decisions without hesitation, and plan a life for myself and my baby that wasn't dictated by fear. My father and I talked for hours, reminiscing, laughing, and even allowing ourselves a few tears. It was a strange blend of catharsis and joy, of sorrow for what had been endured and relief for what had been reclaimed. I realized that the revenge was not only about him. It was about healing me, restoring my family, and teaching my child the importance of courage and integrity. The little moments became the sweetest rewards. Watching my baby take his first unsteady steps in the living room, feeling his laughter ring out free from tension, knowing that he was growing up in a world where his mother was strong and safe. These were victories no confrontation could replicate. And in those moments, I understood the deeper meaning of revenge. It wasn't about humiliation or anger, it was about reclaiming life, about transforming pain into strength, and about proving to myself that betrayal would never define me. Over time, the past became a memory I could reference without fear, a story I could tell my child one day, not to instill anger, but to teach resilience. My father's quiet presence remained a pillar of strength, a reminder that family could be a shield and a force of justice when wielded with care. Together, we had not just survived betrayal, we had transformed it into a lesson of empowerment, courage, and unwavering love. And as the sun rose over the city, spilling light across our small home, I felt something I hadn't in months: hope. Real, unshakable hope. The world was ours again, not because we had sought vengeance in rage, but because we had faced pain with clarity, courage, and love. Tonight we had fixed everything. And now, in the light of day, we could finally begin the life we had been denied.